Well, the Miami Hurricanes needed more safety help. So Mario Cristobal goes out and gets a guy who started on a college football playoff team. From the 206 to the 305, Mishael Powell. Welcome to the U.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. Thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We got our recruiting overlord with us on this episode. He's also my colleague at All Hurricanes. And whenever Brian Smith joins us, he's brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So we have the man with us now. Brian, I looked at areas I thought Miami still needed to address. Safety, I think, was an important one. I still think at some point Miami's going to grab another wide receiver, probably in April when the transfer portal window opens up again. But let's talk about Mishael, who goes by Mish. So we'll call him Mish Powell, who started 13 games for the Washington Huskies this past season. In the past 3 years, he's played in double-digit games every single year. Ton of experience. Ton of versatility. I know that's something Miami looks for in defensive backs, and I think this guy could potentially play in the star if needed, but I look at him as being probably one of the two starting safeties for Miami this coming season.
He's 6'1", 210 pounds based on what I looked up, and he has a lot of experience. 3 years playing Power 5 football. He had a pick 6 last year, 3 picks. I mean, he's around the ball. He's a physical kid, and he's consistent. Most of his tackles last year, at least listed, were solo. He's a guy that'll blitz. I think Miami can use him in a lot of ways, and obviously the coordinator at Miami is tremendous at mixing it up, ask any offense that had to deal with him. I'm curious to see how they'll use him in packages. I think strong safety, overall, your point is right.
Yeah.
But when they go nickel and dime, where are they going to use him? He's an experienced kid, so Lance Guidry's scheme should be a little easier for him to pick up the concepts. I mean, the calls will be different school, but he'll pick that up. I'm interested to see what they do with him because I mean, I'll be honest. It was the one spot that I was worried about in 24. You can't lose 2 NFL players and it be the same next year. I'm not saying they're going to replace the 2 players, Cam, James, those are really rare, but this is about as good as you're going to get. They got 2 kids with experience coming in. They got a couple of young guys that played well during the season when they got chances. Miami's in a much better place right now than I thought they would be even 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, to your point, I look at the likely top 4 safeties, like the 2 deep. Savion Riley, you mentioned, who came over from Vanderbilt, he's actually, I think, got 3 years of eligibility left. Just so people know, Mish Powell has 1 year remaining, 1 year of eligibility left, which obviously it's a double-edged sword. You're like, oh, he's only going to be here for 1 year, but he's also got loads of experience. Again, this guy, and it's funny because, Brian, people have kept asking me since he committed last night, like, can this guy really play, or is this just a jag? Is this guy like a roster filler? I'm like, okay, so Miami fans, I love Miami, obviously, but our team just went 7-6, and we got some fans who are looking at a guy who started on a team that played in the national championship game, and they're wondering if that dude's a jag. Like, he'll be okay, all right? I think he's very likely to contend for a starting spot on the Miami Hurricanes this year. Some more of the stats. Brian gave a couple of them to you. Had 3 interceptions, like he mentioned, including a pick 6, 38 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. One of those, by the way, Brian, I know that Mish is capable of hitting hard, because one of the clips that's been going around, I did retweet it or re-exit on my X account at Locked On Canes, is him just putting on a big hit on an Oregon running back. And you look at that, it's like, okay, this guy's going to fit right in down here at Miami.
You need that kind of example from your safeties, especially when you had those 2 guys last year.
Yeah.
Williams and Kinchens. Again, you're not going to replace them, but it's nice to have that presence in the back end of the defense. And you almost have to have it with Lance's approach to defensive football, because he wants to bring guys. You're going to be one-on-one a lot of times, even as a safety. And safeties generally aren't that kind of mentality, but this kid's been in that. And in the Pac-12, he's seen about as many good receivers as you're going to see. He saw them every day in practice, that's for sure. Yeah. They had the best wide receiver corps in the country. There's no debating that. So I think he will do well. I'm hoping that he's going to be able to hit the ground running. I'm probably, except for Cam Ward, as excited to see him as anybody else during spring ball, because if you don't figure out safety in today's world, you will get destroyed. Teams will find a way to hit big plays on you. Again, your point about he's played 3 years is vital. The other young man's played 1. He's still experienced, but it's not like he's proven it over several years. So this is as big an addition to the roster minus Cam Ward as the Canes have gotten.
By the way, shame on me for going almost 6 minutes without mentioning. So the backstory on Mishael Powell committing to Miami. Obviously, there was a need to fill, and Miami gets an experienced player, all that stuff that Brian and I just talked about. But you know where Powell visited right before he visited Miami? He was at the University of Florida. He was visiting old G5 Billy, LinkedIn Billy Napier, because he's got his LinkedIn jobs profile all spiced up, believe me, because he's going to need that within the next 6 or 7 months or so. So Powell visited Florida. I know this is one of those things where obviously you get a player down for a visit right before the enrollment deadline to be part of the spring semester. Florida was hoping to lock him down early in the week. Don't let him get down to Miami. Powell did get down to Miami, and he chose the University of Miami over the University of Florida. So now, Brian, would you agree that even though I'm not saying Miami has a bad receiver room by any stretch of the imagination, but I still think that now, after having addressed safety with a couple of quality players, Miami is going to be a little bit young at spots outside of Darryl Porter in the cornerback room. But I still look at wide receiver, especially after just having, added the most sought after quarterback in the transfer portal. I think Miami could use another experienced wideout. I don't think they're going to be able to fill that spot until after spring football. Like, they have Leland Smith is going to visit, but that's after the deadline to enroll in spring. So I think at some point in April, Miami is probably going to look to add another receiver or two.
They've got a couple different ways to look at this. And this is the big box question that's been going around. And this is going to go on for years. After the Florida State debacle against Georgia, Kirby Smart did 2 things with basically one comment. He talked about the NCAA has screwed up the portal. There's not much regulation with it, obviously, and how they handle the transfer, all that stuff. But he also kind of took a dig at Florida State for not putting in the effort to get high school kids and everything. Miami here is just trying to finalize. Their high school recruiting obviously does not need fixing. Miami's doing quite well, but they're in a position to be picky, to go after a guy because of that. It's really important. They're one of the few schools that can recruit alongside Georgia and stuff. So while it would be ideal to get one more guy, it's not paramount. I think Isaiah Horton could be really good. And I also think he didn't have much of a chance behind Colby. Yeah. We'll see. He's going to get his chance in spring ball. And maybe one of the other guys develops too. It's really hard to say. But the boundary position that they lost with Colby leaving is the hardest of the 3 to fill. Either you're 6'3", 205, 210, or you're not. It's just it's hard because you're up on the line. You're going against a talented guy. There's no room if you don't understand how to get off bump coverage. So I agree that it would be great to get one, but Miami's trying to put the cherry on top. That's the most important thing for me, because if you look at the roster, name another spot that you're like, okay, man, they're screwed right here. They don't have any answers. There isn't one for me.
There's not one for me either.
Yeah. So, and I put this up at All Hurricanes today. I was talking about Bud Elliott. He thinks, as a Florida State fan, that Miami's probably the favorite to win the ACC next year.
Wow.
I know Bud well, and he's not a Miami fan by any means, but he was just honest, and he was kind of going through the roster. Safety was his one thought when they did a podcast the other day that I was quoting him from, but they just got the kid from Washington right after that podcast dropped. Yeah. Of course, that's how it works. And I mean, the receiver thing, he thinks they're one of the top groups in the league too, as it stands now.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah.
Who would you put ahead of them? Seriously, who would you put ahead of?
Yeah, I mean, I like, North Carolina State had a good, they got Casey Concepcion, who I thought was one of the best in the ACC. They added a couple good guys in the portal, including a kid from Ohio State. So like NC State's receiving room, I think you could speak better on Florida State's receiver room. I'm sure it's still a work in progress because they lost their top 2 guys.
It's hard to lose 2 NFL guys. It's the same like with Miami at safety. I don't care who you put. I mean, they got all the reps. It's just you're new. How do they fit in? You can't put that factor in there. I would say that Florida State is going to be good. Like Hakeem Williams, it's just a matter of time. But how long does it take him and the other guys to be the man on 3rd and 4 when everybody knows they're going to get like Restrepo? He drops like 2 passes a year. Well, they throw it to him on 3rd down. You know, I mean, he's not perfect, but he only had a couple the whole season. When he's getting the ball, he's getting the ball. You know, you got to cover that guy. Florida State, I don't know yet. Clemson, their receiving corps, they have some chances, but I don't know. And then what your point about NC State is true as well, but that again, it's new.
Yeah.
So Miami's putting the cherry on top if they get one more guy. And don't forget, they've got good freshmen coming in by midseason. Some of those guys, I don't know which ones it'll be for sure. Maybe it's JoJo, maybe it's Chance. I don't know. They're going to help too. Miami's receiving corps, I'm not shedding a tear for Cristobal and his coaching staff.
I'm not either. And we're only getting started on this episode of Locked On Canes. I woke up this morning and I realized that Brian Smith and I have not talked on air yet about Cam Ward. And I want to get Brian's take because Brian is a big advocate of Shannon Dawson. So I'd love to hear Brian's take and his insight on Ward and Shannon Dawson's offense and how Dawson can benefit from having a quarterback who essentially doesn't have any limitations. So my friends, you want to keep it locked right here. We got a lot more to come on this brand new episode live. Smash that like button on Locked On Canes. The best is yet to come with eBay Motors, my friends. My goodness, if you need parts for your car, there is literally no other place you should go. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. We are also brought to you by the great people at LinkedIn Jobs. Start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business into the next level this year? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your business all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn also knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making this recruiting overlord episode of Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. So, Brian, the last time we spoke, on air at least, Miami had just added Reese Poffenbarger. We weren't sure if another veteran was going to come in. Miami got their guy, like the guy that they had started their search with, their quarterback search, and it ultimately ends with Cam Ward picking Miami over the National Football League. You're a big Shannon Dawson advocate. How do you expect Cam Ward to fit in Dawson's offense, and how could Dawson adapt his offense to Cam Ward?
Well, this is 2 parts. Number one, he's adapted before, and that's why I am an advocate. Most guys that come from the quote-unquote air raid scheme don't really navigate far away from it. Traditionally, he is the exception. When he took over as the offensive coordinator at West Virginia their first year, Geno Smith, who obviously had success in the NFL, he went bonkers. He was one of the finalists for the Heisman, I believe, all that stuff. And if you can throw it around at West Virginia, that's not easy because they're not getting the same talent Miami is. Let's not kid ourselves, especially up front. You got to make it happen. He was running for his life sometimes, but they had guys that could run, a few South Florida kids, Dino included, and they made it work. He goes to Houston a few years later, and he's got a quarterback that can move a little bit, but his last year, Clayton Tune, ran for over 500 yards. Air raid guys do not like that as a general rule. And Shannon's talked about this. He goes, I might be labeled that, but I'm really an adapt to whatever we got guy.
Yeah.
You take that offense, and I'm sure everybody that's a true Miami fan has at some point looked at some Cam Moore. If you haven't, please do. Go look at some of his highlights. And I'm not trying to pick on him, but the offensive line at Washington State doesn't have Maui Noah. Okay, they don't have.
I'll pick on him, Brian. That was a bad O-line.
Like he got hit a lot. He fumbles. He needs to be better with ball control and stuff. That's his one problem, and that'll be a focus this spring, I'm sure. But if you just would have taken the UM offensive line and put him at Washington State, he would have been in New York for the Heisman series. So he wouldn't have won it, but he would have thrown for 500, 800 more yards. Because they had guys like the Kelly kid and some other guys. They had some receivers. I mean, they had legit guys, but you can't pass the football when you're on your back. So he's got the ability to extend plays. He doesn't like to run per se, but he can. But he'll extend a play and hit a guy for 20 yards, which is the best. There's nothing worse as a defense is almost getting the guy, and then he escapes and completes a pass. Dawson's coached that player before, but not, in my opinion, with as much arm talent as Ward. And that's why if you're a Miami fan and you have not done so yet, check out the video. Every angle you can think of in throwing the football, it's basically these are the things that you shouldn't teach your kid plays because he can just do it. That's what Cam is. I don't think it's going to be that difficult for Dawson because he's going to call the same basic plays, but he can do things that other guys at UM have not been able to do yet.
Right.
Even if it's just 1 or 2 plays a game that you convert that third down instead of being 5 of 12 on third downs. If you're 7 of 12 in a game, extend 2 more drives. And even if it's just 2 field goals, add 6 more points to every game Miami had last year. They're going to win 2 or 3 more games. That's just the way it is. So I think they're going to do very well. And again, the offensive line is the key.
Yeah.
Give Cristobal and everybody, Mirabal, all those guys, the entire staff that have helped to recruit that group. I know flat out they are extremely high on the guys coming in that are redshirt freshmen, sophomores. It's going to be a battle for playing time, and they got dudes.
Yeah, for sure.
Ward's going to be able to throw play action on 3rd and 2 instead of 3rd and 7. I mean, come on. This is not rocket science. They have a chance to have a tremendous passing game, and it'll be a little bit different because of Ward's athleticism.
Yeah, I was on with Spencer McLaughlin, our mutual friend. I know you know Spencer as well. He does the new Locked On College Football Kickoff or Locked On College Football show. I do the kickoff show. He does the Locked On College Football show. Everyone should watch it. Spencer does an awesome job. Now he's also the Locked On Oregon Ducks host, and of course, people who are fans and around Oregon, they have their opinions on Mario Cristobal, right? And I don't think those opinions will ever be changed. And the whole Cristobal quarterback killer narrative gets brought up. I don't completely get it because they always bring up Cristobal with Justin Herbert. I wasn't in the weeds like the Oregon fans were, but Justin Herbert was a former 3-star recruit who ended up being a top 6 NFL draft pick. So I don't get the whole quarterback killer. It's not like he was a 5-star who then went undrafted. I don't get the whole quarterback killer narrative. Do you have, is it just, I guess people look at Cristobal as having this conservative philosophy, but do you have any opinion on that narrative? Like, should Cam Ward fans be concerned that he's going to step into Miami's offense and they're going to run 80% of the time and he's going to throw for 1,500 yards?
At Oregon, they're used to throwing it around all over the place. You got to remember that was not long after Chip Kelly. Their expectations are just skewed.
That's true.
I mean, Chip Kelly's offense is one of the most incredible that's ever hit college football, Oregon or otherwise. That being stated, Cristobal's pretty conservative, but Herbert, when they had to, he could throw the ball, and he, had talent. He was like, he got an offer right before signing day, if I remember right. From like nobody wanted him. He is the ultimate. We just found one guy because I think he's from the greater Eugene area. Like, great story, but he's the exception, not the rule. And Cristobal didn't have the same talent all around,
right? Like
he has going into this next season at Oregon, in my opinion. Let's see what he does this year. And again, 3rd down and 2 with a guy like Ward, who's ultra athletic. The option, like I don't know your wife, Alex, but I have confidence that she could call 3rd down and 2 plays with Ward in Miami's offensive line.
She could, and I don't even, she doesn't even know how many downs there are, but she could probably call a third down play with Cam. Like she'll think, oh, we may save this for fifth down. She might think that, but she could probably call a decent third down play.
There you go. I just don't think it's that hard. Dawson's an experienced coordinator, been coordinating for like a decade. I don't think it's going to be that difficult. So Miami's run game, they're still going to rely on it more than anything else because I don't think most teams will be able to handle the Canes up front, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But in the money games, there's only about 4 games that really reward is needed if Miami doesn't have injury problems. That's just truth. Their schedule is pretty light next year. We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But in those games, there's going to be some 3rd and 7s when everybody in the stadium knows, okay, Miami's got to pass here. That's why Miami went out and got him.
And I want to talk about that schedule. Not all the dates are announced, but we do know all the opponents and we know all the homes and aways for Miami next year. I think, like, compared to the schedule this past year, it looks like Miami dodged a few bullets in terms of teams that they're not playing in the ACC. I want to decide with Brian the 3 or 4 toughest games on the schedule next year. I can't guarantee you wins or losses this early, but I do want to take a look at Miami's strength of schedule because that gives us an idea. So, you know what you want to do, my friends? You want to keep it locked right here. More Locked On Canes coming up. And I know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. This is where I've been getting my action all season long, my friends. And I know playoffs may be over for my Miami Dolphins. College football playoff may be over, but the NFL playoffs continue. NBA, NHL, there's so much going on. There's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find popular parlays. Guys, the player props are so much fun. That's kind of replaced fantasy football for me because I like to go in and do some player props, and there's so much more you can take a look at. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen today. By the way, the everydayers, you want to take that everydayer experience to the next level? Sign up for our exclusive SMS texting service, Locked On Canes Insiders. I include a link in the show description below. Sign up for Locked On Canes Insiders. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours, one-on-ones, breaking news, recruiting info, transfer portal scoops. You can try it free for 14 days by clicking the link below. Then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there. All right, Brian Smith, let me see if I can share my screen here real quick and take a look at the Miami Hurricanes football opponents coming up for this season. So, all right, I looked through this. The first few games, the first 4 games have dates announced. We know Miami opens at Florida, then they're home against FAMU, home against Ball State, at USF. The rest of these games are not in any particular order, but Miami's going to have road games at Cal, road game at Georgia Tech. Hopefully you can, be up and take a knee to end that game this time around. At Louisville, home against Duke, home against Florida State, home against Virginia Tech, home against Wake Forest, and you're at Syracuse this year. So for me, right off the bat, Brian, I can confidently say I think the 2 toughest games, the 2 toughest on the schedule, obviously Florida State is always going to be in that conversation. And I would say Louisville. Obviously, Louisville had a good team last year. I think they have upgraded a lot in the transfer portal. Florida State actually has the 3rd ranked portal class in the country. Louisville has the 4th ranked transfer portal class in the country. So that's my top 2. Do you agree? And who else would you put in the top 3?
Florida being the opening game in the Swamp. For anybody that's been to a game there, and the only game I've ever been to there was a game against Vandy when they won like 56-0. But that place is loud, man. That is no joke. Welcome to the SEC, Cam Ward. You're coming to Miami to play in the ACC, but your first game's in the Swamp.
Yeah,
that's top 5 stadium for me nationally. So that's one. Florida State speaks for itself, and I agree. Louisville. 2 things about the Louisville game. Number one, I'm concerned, and we don't know yet. Alex is correct. The full schedule is not brought back. I don't know when they're going to announce that, March or April, whatever. But the game before the Louisville game, boy, if you could ever have a off week or a milder opponent, whatever, playing against that offense is not easy
No.
because it is very multiple, a gazillion shifts. It's not the option, but it's the next thing to it because it's a pro offense. It's a pain to
Right.
prepare for. In that stadium and those people, they are jumping out of the rafters. I don't know what has happened at Louisville, but like their home crowd is legit.
Yeah.
I never would have expected. I grew up in the Midwest. It was okay sometime. I don't know what's happened, but it's elevated for whatever reason and good for their fans. If you go in there and take them lightly, they've got like 20 transfers or whatever already. They're like Miami and several other schools are fine tuning, but they've added a lot of guys. I think that could be the biggest contender for the game. I think Miami's the favorite personally right now, just on paper because of Ward to win the league. But there's 4 or 5 teams: NC State, Louisville, Florida State, etc., Clemson, that are in that conversation. Do not discount Louisville.
Right.
The wild card you and I talked about off air is Georgia Tech.
Yes.
My concern with them is they've got a legit quarterback.
Yeah.
They obviously don't think they can get beat by Miami. Now they found a way the goofy game last year, and they're at home. So if Miami takes them lightly, that's the other game. That's the kind of game, honestly, in the last 20 years, Alex, we've talked about this. Miami finds a way to screw it up.
Right.
If you're going to be a legit conference title contender and playoff, which Miami would be if you win the ACC, you can't lose to Georgia Tech. That game I have circled from a personal perspective. How do you handle that kind of situation?
That's the type of game. It's going to show us what the mentality of Miami's locker room is made of.
Right.
Because if you were talking about, and obviously I'm not saying that the Canes of the 80s or 90s would have lost to Georgia Tech the way Miami did last year, but if you're in that situation, you have a shocking loss to these guys at home. The following year, you go to their house. If that happened to the Canes in like 90 into 91 or 2000 into 2001, Miami goes in there and they put a beat down, right? An example I'll give to you is 2000, Miami lost to Washington on the road in a game that ultimately cost them a BCS national championship game.
That's right.
The following year, they hosted Washington and Miami beat them 65-7. Like that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like every Miami Hurricane player, even the guys who weren't on the roster last year, need to have that Georgia Tech game circled, and they need to go in there with beat down on their mind. That's just how you have to look at that.
Sure. I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, with the transfer portal era, it's just different. The roster changes so much, and this is not a Miami thing. That's Alabama. Look at Alabama right now. I've never seen anything like it. I know kids pick schools for a coach, but good Lord, they're in trouble. This is a different era. Miami is ascending right now with their roster. Obviously, Alabama is descending, and now it's just about that chemistry. Yeah. If there was ever a time, I hate the coach speak during spring ball. Every year it's the same from every coach. It's awful. We're getting better. Today was a good practice, blah, blah, blah. It better be in today's era with chemistry. That's the biggest thing because it's not going to be a roster issue with Miami. The talent with who they've gotten at safety now, at quarterback, they even got a center to replace Matt Lee. They have done tremendous. It's about chemistry. So there's a chance Miami goes into next season as the big favorite to win the ACC, honestly.
Wow. Well, I can already tell you the next time we have Brian Smith on, we're going to take a deep dive on the Junior Day visitors coming in the end of January. I had so much other stuff to get to with Brian on this episode, but you know what, guys? You want to follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Always great information from Brian on social media. You want to make sure you check out his work and mine at allhurricanes.com, allhurricanes.com. Make that your spot for Miami Hurricanes news and updates. And Brian, we will talk to you again soon, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And we will talk to everybody again soon. Welcome to the U, Mishael Powell. Hopefully, we'll have more play. Miami may be done adding players until April, and they are 8 scholarships over the limit right now. There's going to be more exits and more incomings after spring football. So we'll keep you guys updated on all of that on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.